welcome back to my channel, or if you're new, welcome to the channel. I am starting a photography series where I kind of go into the behind the scenes portion of my videos, as well as going into Lightroom and talking about what I'm doing in regards to the editing. And then from there, I kind of talk about the improvements that I would do for the next time. So to start off, I already kind of talked about this photo that I've done already, only because in my previous episode I did a two photographers edit the same photo, in which Dennis and I had the one image of him that we both decided to edit and then kind of see what our editing process is. So I've already kind of mentioned a little bit about the things that I used during that shoot, but I'll just say it again. I use my Canon 60 as well as the 85mm lens. I did use my Flashpoint Speedlight, and I did bring a little bit of like a softbox, which I will link down below if anybody has any questions regarding that. I kind of mentioned this again already in my last video, but I did want to use the softbox that I typically use, but it was just too heavy. I think with the tripod as well as the small mount for the Speedlight, it just could not hold that much weight, on top of it being like slightly windy. So I think just a word of warning for people who are interested in doing off-camera flash, just kind of make sure that everything that you have is like heavy and stable enough so it doesn't knock over and break any of your equipment.
So now that the photo shoot has been completed, we're going to go into Lightroom and start the editing process. So on the right hand side, you see these little three lines that have circles on them. We're going to tap on that, and this goes into the editing process, which kind of gives you the basics of what to do in regards to light, color, and all that other stuff. So when we had first started with this photo, it was extremely very dark, and we obviously needed to know that we needed to boost this up just a little bit. So what we're going to do is we're going to bring the exposure back up a lot, and one of the things that you have to pay attention to is the highlights in the photo. So especially near Dennis's face as well as the hand over here, you don't want that to be extremely bright, because that's going to show that you're not really knowing what you're going for, or it's going to spike up the chart, which is never a good idea. So what we're going to do is make sure that the highlights are down a little bit, and we wanted to bring the shadows back up. Now when you bring the shadows up, the only problem that you're going to have is if you bring the shadows up too much, this can cause the photo to become extremely grainy, as you can see as I'm bringing the slider back up. So what I would recommend is to try to have something along the lines of 20 or 25, because this is really going to tell, this is going to show a little bit more of the clothing that we kind of want, but also not to the point where it's going to be extremely grainy. In the effects panel, still on the editing side, right on the bottom over here, there's split toning, so we're going to tap on that. And one of the things that I wanted to mention is that the cool thing about Lightroom is that you can actually select what color you would want the highlights to be, as well as the shadows. So in the shadows, I don't want them to be completely jet black. I want them to be slightly a little bit brown. So what I had selected is kind of this little area that tells me what kind of color I want. So obviously if we want to make it green, we can make it green, or if you want to make it red, you can make it red. But I kind of want to do something that's like still natural, but does give a little bit of an interesting vibe. So something like that would be perfect. The last thing that I want to mention is that I had a couple of things that I wanted to highlight in this photo. So with the things that I discussed last time in my previous video, is that I thought the right hand corner was way too bright. So what I did is I had just tapped over and dragged into this little light portion right here to kind of display what I had done is I kind of just drew over this portion where it was extremely bright and brought it down. So obviously you can see that it's obviously could be very distracting to someone if they're looking at this image, and if you bring it down, it just makes it less obvious that it's light in that corner. So one of the things that Dennis and I had noticed when we were editing this photo is that Dennis's hand was very bright, and if something is super bright in the photo, your eye automatically goes to that point. So what we had done is we had just drawn over Dennis's hand and we had just brought the exposure down just a little bit. So obviously you can see that if it's pretty light, it could be something that could become very distracting, but if you just bring it down just a little bit, it's more into the foreground and it's less noticeable. The last thing that I want to mention is that I typically add a little bit of brightness into the eyes, so I'll kind of make a circle in the pupil area and just bring up the exposure just a little bit in this portion, just so we can really make those eyes pop.
One of the improvements that I would suggest is when it comes to people that aren't really comfortable being in front of the camera, you always have to make sure that they have enough confidence. So one of the things that I usually recommend is to crack a little bit of jokes or make them feel more comfortable and, you know, kind of be as friendly as you can, because this is really gonna like change the way that a photo looks. Obviously, when Dennis and I had first started, I would take some photos of him and he would feel extremely comfortable being in front of the camera. I think that obviously everyone can be photogenic and everyone can get awesome and fabulous photos of themselves, but sometimes people don't think that way. So what I would recommend with the models, just to like crack a little bit of jokes, make them feel more comfortable. This is obviously going to make them feel less tense and it's going to go for a better photo. Last suggestion that I have when it comes to the models when they're posing is sometimes it's very difficult to know the angle of the camera when it is in regards to your hands. So sometimes the thing that I would recommend is always to make sure that your hand is sideways toward the camera rather than flat, because usually this is the most unflattering position that a hand could be in. So what I would recommend is just always to have the hand either slightly directly towards the camera sideways, or have it a little bit tilted so you see the inner portion rather than the back, because usually this is for more masculine poses. And I know that Dennis obviously it has a more masculine look to himself, but this can also bounce light differently. So obviously we know that we had this trouble with the highlights where it was too bright, only because the front of the hand was catching so much of the light. So if you're having troubles and issues with the highlights, what I recommend is always to have the model place the hand sideways close to their face or close to their body. And that's the end of this video. If you guys are interested in more photography videos like this, please feel free to give me a like as well as a comment down below giving me any improvements. I always love suggestions and I am willing to, you know, continue working on these videos to improve them, to see what you guys like and you don't like. If you guys want to click the subscribe button and hit the notification bell to be notified every time I post a new video, that will essentially tell you every time I post a new photography video, which should be hopefully once a week if I can keep this up, but we'll see. And then as well as all of my social media information is going to be linked down below.